Hello and welcome to the first ever open source Underdogs YouTube live stream. I'm your host, Mike Schwartz, founder of Glue, and today, as I mentioned, is the first episode ever, the inaugural episode, and our discussion today is about FOSDEM 2025, which is coming up in a few weeks on February 1st and 2nd, and this is a talk about digital public goods with DPG product owners. And our guests today are David Higgins, Director of Programs at MIFOS, Akanksha Saklani from the World Resources Institute, and Edward Duffus, co-founder and CEO of Open CRVS. Welcome, everyone.
Hi.
And, normally I start these things by asking the guests to do introductions. And today we're going to do something a little different. I'm going to quickly introduce myself and the Janssen Project. Since this is the first episode, I feel like the audience hasn't officially met me yet. And then we'll go around, how about in alphabetical order, and everyone else can give a quick introduction to the audience. But since I'm moderating, I'm going to actually rarely take the stage here. And so my name is Mike Schwartz. I'm the founder and CEO of Glue. At Glue, we lead a project at the Linux Foundation called the Janssen Project, which is an open source identity and access management platform for enterprises. It's used by large organizations, governments, banks, and healthcare sector to build their consumer or citizen-facing identity services. It's productized by large companies such as IDEMIA and NEC, where they take the open source and build it into commercial products. And Glue itself takes our open source Janssen project, and we make a commercial distribution called Glue Flex. You can think of Glue in the open source space sort of like Fedora and Red Hat. The Linux Foundation Janssen project is Fedora. It's the upstream open source that's the head of the project, the latest and greatest. And then Glue Flex is a commercial distribution of that upstream software. And I started this live stream because, as some of you may know, I host a podcast called Open Source Underdogs. There's about 75 episodes with interviews with leaders of open source companies about their business model, opensourceunderdogs.com. And I felt a change of venue might be necessary in 2025, and we're trying to move to live stream. I'm sorry, Akanksha, the first meeting I had you covered with the title. So live streams are easier for me to edit, frankly, and get out and to get out more often. So this is the first ever live stream. We're live streaming on YouTube, and I think I've said way too much already. So let's switch to intros. Akanksha, how about we start with you? How'd you find yourself on this live stream? Oh, we're not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we hear you.
Hi, I'm Akanksha. I have been working with WRI on a project called Energy Access Explorer. We have been working on this project for last six and a half years. And very recently it got announced as a DPG, so we were very happy. So the reason we have been working on it is more than 650 million people do not have access to electricity globally. 3 billion people do not have access to reliable electricity, and more than 2 billion people don't have clean cooking fuels. So can we think of an integrated and inclusive energy planning which can actually help people to achieve these targets? And why energy? Because it's a two-way stream. You need energy for alleviation of poverty, for having immunization, in fact, COVID taught us how much electricity is required, especially in developing and underdeveloped nations. So with this work, we are trying to work in 23 geographies across Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, wherein we work with the different governments as a not-for-profit partners to help them to take integrated and inclusive approach to energy planning. Thank you, Mike, for having me here and talking about EAE.
Okay, and that was a great sort of intro into the world resources. How about David next, alphabetically. Before we dive into MIFOS specifically, How do you get here? What's your journey been like?
Hi, Mike. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm an open source underdog. I'm an open source outsider. So I've only been in open source for the 2 years. My background is sort of enterprise IT for a major telecoms company and then for a financial services company. And about 2 years ago, I switched over to open source and working with the team at Methos and using some of what I've learned in enterprise, applying it with a bit with open source and finding out what GitHub is and struggling along and getting there. And that's kind of been my journey. Product owner for a couple of the DPGs we manage, and looking forward to being at FOSDEM and meeting you guys face to face, not just on a live stream.
Yeah, FOSDEM will definitely be fun. Ed, you're the founder, or was it founder or co-founder?
I'm very happy to say I'm co-founder of OpenCRVS together with Nina Werson, and I'm CEO, also OpenCRVS. My journey to sort of get here, it's over about 12 years now. So I started professional life at Accenture, where I worked in the advanced systems and technology practice, doing lots of IT work with sort of large clients. Then got a little bit burnt out and bored with that. So I went to work for an NGO. I went to work at Plan International, a global child rights organization that really captured my imagination, and in particular to use technology for global development. And there was a very compelling problem statement which I uncovered there, which is really the plight of the large number of unregistered children around the world. Some 250 million children under the age of 5 who are unregistered, therefore unaccounted for, unprovided for, etc. So this really captured my imagination, enthusiasm, and I brought some really strong sort of technologists with me who convinced me that it was possible to create an open source platform to try to resolve this problem. And then more recently, we actually set up we span off from OpenCRVS, which is a fantastic incubator of our work, and we now run OpenCRVS, the organization based out of the UK, as a not-for-profit organization, as a home for OpenCRVS, our digital public good.
So, Akansha, you started to tell us a little bit about the World Resources Institute, and how does that connect to digital public goods exactly? I didn't quite see that. I understand why energy is so existentially important. As I sit here bathed in light, 4 different lights. But how does it actually connect to the digital public goods? Is there some software projects that you're sponsoring?
So World Resources Institute basically works in, so we have a theory that how can we work with the different governments, different partners for a sustainable, transitions and we work in water, energy, climate, food, with people, climate and nature as our pathways. So within people, climate and nature, we have one pathway called energy in the team where I work in. So there we have developed a platform called Energy Access Explorer. It's a online geospatial platform which takes your multidimensionality of energy into account when you're talking about energy planning, because traditionally what happens is like the energy planning has been either supply side driven or demand side driven. For example, if you see there's a lot of sunlight, governments will say just let's put solar there, even though there might or might not be people living. So can you actually bring in demand and supply at the same space? And the reason we wanted to go with open source and DPG is because we are working in unserved and underserved regions. Like I mentioned, there are 650 million people who do not have access to electricity. So in a resource constrained setting, can we develop a platform which is scalable, because we talk about modular platform, which then allows us to expand it if required quickly, depending on our partners and the way we are engaging, to actually bring in demand and supply at the same space. The reason we wanted to build Energy Access Explorer was a lot of people in the ministries, like health ministry, education ministry, or your even electricity ministry, do not have geospatial experts with them. So can we actually bring in a tool which allows them to do on-the-fly high resolution analysis at without having to rely on special softwares which are very expensive or the programming expertise? And when I say high resolution analysis, we have gone up to 100 meter, which is giving them on-the-fly analysis. So the idea is to reduce their dependency. They are able to take data-driven decisions and also reduce the software engineering costs by going open source. So this is how we started. We started with Tanzania, Zambia, and Uganda in 2019, and now we are in 23 geographies. Two countries in Asia, Nepal and India. While in India, we are looking at a state level or a sub-county level analysis, because the country is very big and one size fits all doesn't matter, is not applicable. And in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, we are looking at the country level analysis. We work with the different county level countries, depending on to how to make them energy planning, how to work with them so that they actually take decisions which actually can lead to better energy planning and energy decisions going forward.
I think I'm understanding what energy planning is. Like here in Texas, in the summer, there's always peak demand for cooling, and we always wonder, like, should we reduce our electricity usage? Try and ease the pressure on the grid. Is that the type of information that governments are looking to get about the energy grid, or am I missing something more obvious?
So it's more than that. So when we are working in Kenya, the country has a rule that every 2 years, every county has to make a county energy plan. So they make it that in 2 years, where are the people who do not have access to electricity, which is the best way to provide electricity to them, and what are the energy demands which will come up. So when we talk about energy demand, we talk about household energy demand. What is the demand which is going to come up from your commercial enterprises? Is there a growth of demands which will come from EVs, or there will be a heating or cooling demand? So we use different energy models, and generally we try to go with open source model, and then we integrate the results of the model on EAE. Then we have energy demand which is going to come up. What are the different sources of energy supply? Do you have a grid network already there? Is there a solar rooftop present? Or what is the potential? Do you have a wind potential? Do you have a solar potential? Or do you have a small hydro potential? So that government can actually see that this is my demand coming up, and this is a way I can actually push my demand, complete the demand. So yes, like you said, and we also do long-term prediction and planning, because demand keeps on changing day by day. And you also have to plan that, are you able to fulfill the demand while not breaking a bank?
Interesting. Sounds like you have some economists maybe who need to do some hard math there too. Cool. Well, thank you for enlightening me, because I understand it a little better now. So David, why don't you tell us a little bit about MIFOS? My knowledge is also very superficial here. I know it's something about payments and payments management to citizens for benefits, but that's about where it ends. So tell us a little more.
Yeah, sure. So MIFOS has different meanings at different levels, actually. So MIFOS Initiative, which is the non-profit organisation, so 501c3, has been around for many, many years, and it actually manages 4 projects actively, 2 of which are digital public goods. So MIFOS X, which is where you get to the second level of MIFOS, is a core banking solution. So that core banking solution can be used by small or large organizations. It's very scalable, and uses the Apache Fineract as the back end, and applies layers above it, such as the web app and the mobile apps, etc., to make it really functional for organizations to operate. We also have Payment Hub EE. That's a payments orchestration middleware layer. So that would be used by banks to connect into instant payment systems, for example, or it could even be used by governments. We worked with the ITU and the GovStack initiative in the last few years to make sure it can cope with the sort of flows governments need, government to person payments, such as sort of payments out for welfare payments, or receiving payments in as a government for services they're offering, known as P2G. We also have a number of mobile applications within our open source projects that basically connecting to our core banking solutions, connecting to our payment orchestration systems, etc. And then we have a very new project which only launched at the back end of last year called Mythos Gazelle, which is a first foray into DPI as a package solution, and really trying to turn the head on what's been maybe a complex installation process for DPGs in the past and make it simple.
So you're based in the London area, and I happen to know that London and England is, or I should say, UK is one of the most advanced open banking federations. There's something called the OBI, the Open Banking Implementation Entity, that runs this UK. Do you think that influenced how you thought about payments at all when you built Mythos?
No, I won't take the credit for that. So Mythos is based in California. I just happen to be in London. So Ed Cable, our CEO and president, has been involved for much longer than I have. And so Mythos has been around about 15 years. The influence came from a number of different places. It started as a project within the Grameen Foundation, and then came out to Green Foundation and was sort of nurtured and guided along parts of, say, went into Apache Foundation for the back end, and then other parts have sort of been developed as we've been out talking to people, understanding what the need is, and sort of refining the product towards that.
Interesting. Yeah, there's been a lot of movement in governments to introduce standard APIs that you can use to interact with banks for things like payments. And so I see that also as a lot of times is driving the banks also to figure out how to build these services. Cool. Well, we'll dig more into that. Ed, tell us about you were helping me understand before the call, but help the audience understand what is Open CRVS and what does it do?
Yeah, what does it do? Well, let me start with the problem we think it solves, because all digital public goods, they're open source software solutions which solve societal problems. They're for social impact. So the problem that we're trying to solve, as I was sort of getting to earlier, is about civil registration. So civil registration, is a function of government around the world. It's about the registration of births, deaths, marriages, divorce. Of course, we take this for granted, presumably, but around the world, let's take sub-Saharan Africa. Around half of births, are going unrecorded, every year, etc. Which is a terrible state to leave children in, because it effectively means that they can't be recognized. They don't have a legal identity, and therefore, very difficult to protect them and provide for them, when their governments and others, want to do so. So, when we looked around the sort of solution space, what we found was, this is about 10 years ago, a number of proprietary solutions, developed by vendors, mostly with, really terrible contractual arrangements for governments who have implemented those solutions, etc. And homegrown solutions which really weren't fit for purpose, which weren't secure, which weren't functioning properly. So we saw a space there to create something new, an open source product. OpenCRS is a configurable product, which means it can be configured for the civil registration contexts of different countries, because there's substantial variability country by country of how civil registration is actually done, the actors involved, the processes, etc. So we went about, creating what we believe is a very high quality solution, which of course, because it's open source, is freely available for countries to implement themselves or with a system integrator, which supports all of their processes and does so with specific features which we've designed, together with countries to ensure it's really responding to the challenges which they face. So, for example, it's an offline first application. So, as you can imagine, in rural sub-Saharan Africa, you can forget connectivity. So, OpenCRS needs to work in rural locations, in communities, by local actors in an offline mode. Gathering data and then synchronizing with a server at some other point. And And so there's various features which we built in, which make it a user-friendly application for users. Users typically like using it. Within a day or two of training on the application, they're up and running and able to use OpenCRVS. It's also designed to be easy to implement as well. So at the moment, the OpenCRVS organization leads some implementations, but the idea, of course, to get to scale, we have ambitions of some 20 countries using OpenCRVS by 2030, and really starting to really tackle the problem of the identity crisis that we have and under registration of children. And to do that, it requires an ecosystem of implementers, etc. So it's important, for us as an open source digital public good, that we're documenting our solution to make sure that others can implement it, also at the same high quality standards which we would see as well.
Do you find yourself answering a lot of questions about blockchain?
From time to time, I'm surely blockchain is the silver bullet for registration systems around the world. I've heard that many times. I guess my typical response is, okay, nice piece of technology. What problem exactly are you trying to respond or with this new technology? And typically the conversation is cut quite short at that point. We understand what problems we're trying to solve, and we think relevant technologies that respond really well to those challenges. And we try not to get too into the cutting edge, etc., such that our platform can be easily implemented also by local actors.
It's a solution looking for a problem.
Often, yeah.
Well, Akansha, let's I had some questions about, I wanted to sort of pivot into a discussion on the DPGA and being a DPGA product owner, because what brings us together with these very different missions, enterprise IT, energy management for governments, financial system, and civil registry, is this organization called the DPGA, the Digital Public Goods Alliance, because we've all taken the time to register our products with the DPGA on an annual basis. And so technically from the DPGA perspective, we're product owners. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts on, so I'll start by giving my own thoughts on what I think DPGA has done well. So I appreciate the DPGA's efforts in particular evangelizing open source and digital public goods with leadership. I think that a lot of times leadership can be very disconnected from IT, information technology, and these types of programs, I think, help, in my opinion, are really good at helping to set some of the priorities for governing, and asking, why are we using this commercial system? And so I find that incredibly great, what they're doing. But I'm curious, from other product owners, what do you like about the DPGA, and how do you think that this ecosystem helps your project? Akansha, any thoughts?
Thanks, Mike. So I completely agree with you to have a standardized authority which is actually telling that, yes, this product can qualify as DPGA or this product is good enough. I also feel that DPGA helps, and so Energy Access Explorer is the only DPG under SDG 7 which talks about access to electricity. So we have been hoping that going forward, a lot of our partners or the different software providers which are there in energy access space, they should also think about making their platform as DPG, because the more you have it in open source, your users can believe your process. It's not like that we have a black box. They can go and see the methodology. They can even reuse the code. And then having a DPG stamp actually help us, get validated. Especially sometimes when you're working with different governments. So like for India, there's a geospatial self-certificate, which then government partners feel, yes, this is something very good. Similarly, when we say in India, this is a DPG platform, they're like, yes, because they also push for more of DPG products. So yes, this is good. We can trust this thing, we can take it forward. So it also helps us build that trust, and we I'm hoping that this also motivates other software providers to actually expand into and have more DPGs, at least in SDG 7.
David, any thoughts on how being a DPGA product owner is good, or what you like about being the ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, well, there's
What are
lots
they
of
getting
things,
right?
but there's lots of things I like about it. But I think picking up on what Akshana said, I think it's enabled a more maturity in that conversation, maybe with governments, etc. We'd all heard open source equals free, open source equals flaky, all those things you hear beforehand. I think what the DPGA has been very good at doing is going into governments and explaining what DPGs actually are. There is some quality vetting behind them. They are still open source, and what that means, i.e., it doesn't mean free. It means different licensing terms. It means much more flexibility, digital sovereignty, and some of those things that governments really need to understand to adopt DPGs. I think the other thing that's been really good, and I've seen this a lot over the and growing momentum, is the DPGA really helping DPGs to work together, because often a solution is a combination of DPGs. We talk with OpenCRVS because sometimes there is payments involved in registration. You want to pay for your birth certificate or whatever. We talk to lots of other DPGs as well, and I think that momentum that we're starting to feel the DPGA leading about DPGs talking to each other, understanding where you can work together, and maybe even working together to provide a solution to a problem that actually exists across multiple DPGs. So yeah, no, it's been good for me.
Interesting. Ed, any thoughts? What's the DPGA? How is it helping? What's it getting right?
Yeah. It's the challenge of going third, of course. You ditto what's gone before. I think DPGAs are great champions of the collective work that digital public goods are doing. Running a digital public good is not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. We might come on to that. I know, Mike. But they're tremendously helpful. I mean, the Digital Public Goods Registry, which they house, is a list of all those digital public goods which have met the Digital Public Goods Standard, and that standard, really quite a large amount of time has gone into creating that standard, and I really think it stands for something. There's a big responsibility when you create a digital public good for a government service, for example, like civil registration, like we do. And to be measured up against the standard, in terms of its licensing, the quality of the code, security of the code, legal frameworks with which it complies, for example, is really helpful. It's that rubber stamp which OpenCRVS, and all the other digital public goods in the registry, can speak to and reference. I think I certainly would not underestimate the power of the convening which Digital Public Goods Alliance brings. We have our annual members meeting at the end of the year. We just had it back in November in Singapore last year. Really tremendous. Like I said, it's not easy running a digital public good, but because of the synergies and the common problems that we face. Both in terms of funding or technology problems, etc. We can face them together, share ideas, and collaborate, which makes it more fun, but also allows us to come up with effective ways of running sustainable and responsible digital public goods, which is for me really the name of the game.
I want to switch to something that we all have in common, I think, which is how to deploy software, and how hard it is to deploy this mission critical infrastructure. And infrastructure sort of implies that it needs to be something that we can rely on, that'll be available. And building quality IT infrastructure is hard, and it's not just the technology. It's also the business processes and the commercial arrangements around it that enable you to rely on that software in the future. Akansha, we'll start with you. can you just share any thoughts on what are some of the challenges maybe of, assuming you have a great product, which it sounds like you do, what are some of the challenges in getting the countries to be able to get the benefit of that in the field, actually?
So, I mean, I actually will not go for IT challenges because everybody knows about that. I will actually look at, so in our space, there are so many different products which come in. Some of them are open source, some of them are not open source. So it's like a person is getting 8 medicine, but they don't know which medicine actually will work. And this was something which Melinda Gates said in a podcast. So she went to meet up women, and then women said that, why are you not eating TB medicine when you have this medicine? The women said, because of these 8 medicine, I don't know which one is right or wrong, because 2 would work, others will not work. So similarly in our space also, there are different products. Some of them are working very good, some of them are not working very good, which actually ends up leading users in confusion that, which is the best approach to take? Where should I go? And what we personally feel is a collaboration between different product users, like David mentioned, that, different DPGs or different products is something which can help it. So that, if I'm building a tool and if I want to use registration, why don't I reach out to Ed and say, can we use your registration process? Then making 4 methods and then, making end users confused. So one thing is that. Second thing which I feel is when something is given for free, like WRI is there for a time, till the time we have a grant for this proposal. Once we go out, what is the sustainability of the platform? Because we have been putting so much effort in this, eventually it should be sustainable. Can we think of a local ownership, local capacity building, so that if we want to take a step back, somebody is there to actually continue it? When we say step back, it's not like that we are going to just go away, but can somebody update the data? Can somebody do the analysis? And we, expand the platform, make it more usable. So I feel these are the 2 bigger challenges than IT software, because we have experts to do all these things.
Yeah, great feedback. I sort of describe IT sometimes like a train or like software development. At the front of the train, we have innovation, because every software product, it's not only what you're doing now, but also what you need the product to do to keep modern. And then there's this middle part of the train, which is just like the daily stream of like security vulnerabilities you have to patch, and you just have to do that work to keep it up to date. And if you don't update it, it's not useful anymore. So it's what the infrastructure is it's not the software as it exists today, but it's a commitment from the open source project to keep patching that thing so you can keep using it. But you need both innovation and the maintenance. So I think, Akansha, I'm just agreeing and sort of reiterating some of the things you said. But David, maybe you could provide some thoughts. I heard allusions to challenges around integration and adoption, but what do you see some of the challenges of actually taking this great vision that the DPGA is helping us get out there and making it reality?
Yeah, I think, as we mentioned, we realised, deployability was one of those challenges for us within Mythos, and we've been working on that with some of the stuff we do. You don't need to have dedicated, consultancy to get it deployed now. You can do it much easier. In 15 minutes, you can install the software. So that's one of the things we focused on. But I think, as Ed mentioned earlier on in the call, it's the softer stuff around the edge that takes the time and is challenging to get done. It's the documentation. It's the training of local partners in the ecosystem. I would say 80% of my time and effort is engaging with our ecosystem of partners. We may steward the open source software, but the people that implement it are the partners within our ecosystem who take that software, adapt it for local scenarios, make sure the use cases flow through it, and providing that support, the documentation to them to be able to do it is the challenge. But it's a good challenge, but it's a challenge and something that we work on and put a lot of effort into.
Ed, any follow-up thoughts on this topic? Challenges on getting it out there?
Well, certainly. I mean, many and lots of war stories to tell. I think the one which I continually come back to is when implementing a digital civil registration system. We need to be thinking about digital transformation. Everyone has their own definition of that, but it's getting to that transformation sort of mindset. So I know what it's not. It's not taking existing processes and just digitizing them, right? And so somehow there's of course a fear at OpenCRVS that our platform is used in a way which just digitizes existing processes. So if your existing process, whether it's manual or digital, is a bad process, if you digitize it, well, you just have a digital bad process, right? And so but this really matters for OpenCRVS because we're a mission-oriented organization. We want to see increased numbers of births, deaths registered around the world. It's not about X number of projects being implemented. We're not a commercial organization. That does not mean that's not a measure of success for us. Success for us is increased registration rates around the world. So if OpenCRVS is used in that way, we're not going to shift the dial on under registration of children around the world. So that's a real challenge because that's that sort of business analysis type work it requires a certain capacity, but we love working with governments around the world, helping them redesign processes to make them more efficient, etc., so they can get the very best out of OpenCRVS and all the features and functionality that it provides. So that's certainly an ongoing challenge. I think one other which is certainly not yet resolved is to think about deployment of such systems on infrastructures and where those infrastructures sit. Many of our projects are in places with low standards of infrastructure, sub-Saharan African countries, for example. And so where is the right place to host systems for civil registration, for example? We have incredible cloud infrastructure around the world, which has incredible capacity, high levels of security and performance, for example. So how can we get the best out of the latest infrastructures around the world, while at the same time ensuring that data governance, ownership and sovereignty of data and processes, etc., is still maintained at that local level. We're working on that at the moment. There's no silver bullet, etc. But I think again, collaboration among digital public goods together with cloud providers, for example, and governments to really sort of start creating the next wave and new models of how such solutions are hosted and run in a effective, cost-effective way is really important.
Akansha, I want to go back to something that you said. So you mentioned that sustaining these projects is one of the challenges, and from my experience, these infrastructure projects have integrators. There's a lot of sort of partners in the ecosystem who provide the service wrap around the solution, but there's not always necessarily a direct funding model for funds to flow back to the open source projects. And there can be an expectation on the part of the governments that need this open source digital public infrastructure that software will be free. Akansha, can you maybe talk about, do you think that the economic model is currently sustainable for digital public goods?
So this is something which we are also struggling internally within the Energy Access Explorer team, that we are totally based on grants and don't take money from the government partners where we are working in. And the expectations are that the trainings will be free of cost. The software is free of cost. If they need any support, we are there.
Wait, can I just interject for 1 second? When you say that the funding is it's funded by grants are one time, they're not recurring. And there's a disconnect there because a software project needs a stream of updates forever to be useful, to be deployed by a government. So is that then that's really the disconnect that you're talking about, right?
Exactly. So our current grant, which will come in end in 2025. So here we are thinking, okay, you can't take, you can't tell the governments to pay for it. But when we work with other international development organizations like World Bank, or you work with African Development Bank, can they, because they do have funds, can they be the, they be using the platform and be paying for the services, or what can be the model which we go for there? And that's where for us the local capacity building, local sustainability becomes more important, because what we do in our model is we have a working group in each and every geography of the country, wherein we are training the local people in the government system, and then they keep on using the thing. And slowly what is happening is like that in their budget line they're talking about, can they have training capacity building of the platform as a part of it? So while they don't have to pay for the upgrades and the features, and we are trying to figure out how do we do it. But yes, I agree, because if the platform is not organic or not growing with time, it will become obsolete. So it has to be sustainable, and it has to be sustainable in a way that it is actually solving the challenge for which we are there, and it's not confusing the end users.
Yeah, well said. David, any thoughts about sort of the sustainability of the business model or the current, or whether optimization is needed?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we think a lot about, to be quite honest, and we've been discussing a lot. And there is that old adage, open source is free, and it's not. And I think it's important to have that conversation up front in opportunities, with governments, and explain, even if you've got grant funding to maybe implement it, you need that ongoing running cost to keep it running. It'll be cheaper, but it's not necessarily free. And we're starting to look at what those sustainable business cases could be. Is it shared infrastructure? Maybe not for governments, but maybe for local bankings or MFIs. Is there shared infrastructure with multi-tenancy that can mean, an upfront investment maybe for, traditional donor sources can put the platform in place for a region, but then the costs are sustainable to the individuals and the organizations that need to use it underneath. As Ed mentioned, for OpenCRVS, MEFOS is driven by a mission. That mission is to serve the underbanked, the 3 billion people that don't have access to finance, systems at the moment, as you and me would do every day of the week. We can only achieve that mission if we can actually tweak the cost paradigm, but make it sustainable. You don't want to give them a solution that works for 3 years, the funding disappears, and they're back to where they were. It's got to be a sustainable model that it can support itself after that initial investment to do so.
Right. In the content space, we had you could sell T-shirts, but then a lot of artists and content creator moved to Patreon, which is a commitment from the fans to so you have predictable revenue. So I kind of feel like maybe the model needs to move from selling T-shirts to Patreon. Ed, any thoughts about sustainability or the mismatch in expectations between governments who think open source is free and the need to really innovate and do outreach and do innovation?
Yeah, awesome. Another favorite subject of mine. The current economic model is certainly not sustainable. That's for sure. Fortunately, predominantly OpenCRVS is currently funded by donors, both the Norwegian government and co-develop, and we're fortunate to be working very, very closely with them to actually work on more sustainable funding models as part of their grant agreement. So that's a really collaborative approach. Look, the software, the free and open source software. It's I can't claim this quote, but open source software is free like a puppy is free, right? As in, it might be free initially, but to put it in a kennel, feed it, maintain it, take it to the vet, for example, over a lifetime, it's not going to be free.
Or another similar corollary is open source is only free if you don't value your time.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So we kind of tried to coin this expression, responsible DPG. We think there's a difference between a DPG and a responsible one. A responsible one takes this very seriously, the sustainability. Because if we don't, then what we're doing is, open source is being implemented, is live in a number of countries, etc. And it would mean that we can't be sure about the sustainability and the support that software will get in the future. That's completely irresponsible. So we've got a whole work stream, going on at the moment, identifying sources of revenue back into our organization as a not-for-profit organization, which we can put into core product development and support for those countries. One really interesting one, I think, we're sort of one of the leading DPGs on, is looking to see how we can change up the relationship with those system integrators. I think in the past, a digital public good is made available. System integrator can pick it up, implement it commercially for a country, make a nice profit and walk away.
So says the Accenture person.
Well, exactly, but I'm a better person because of my my learned experiences. So we're trying to create a new model, and we're trying to increase the value of what we'd like to see is high quality OpenCRS implementations. So we have an accreditation program which is available for all system integrators. Relatively easy to go through, but it shows that you understand how to properly implement OpenCRVS. You've got a base configuration up and running. You've demonstrated it to us, etc. You've got skills both in business analysis and technical skills to be able to implement it. We'll then accredit you as an organization, but then as part of that implementation partner agreement, because that's valuable within the market, we expect them per implementation to pay back into OpenCRVS, like an implementation tariff, if you will, back into the core product, which helps us sustain the product, but also helps them as an organization who continues to implement, make sure that this product is going to be around as well. So we think there's, kind of win-win-win all the way through in terms of, that approach. And likewise, generating revenue, as has already been mentioned, through training, but then also for implementation projects as well. Some particular reference implementations may require the OpenCRVS core team to actually get involved. And of course, we can charge for our services to ensure that's a high quality implementation as well.
I'll just lay my chips on the table here and say what I think too. So, I mean, we're here at Glue. We like the Red Hat model. We think that innovation of open source hasn't been matched in infrastructure. That the with infrastructure projects and software tends to get stale. Once it gets stable, innovation tends to slow, and that an open source development methodology leads to more sustainable innovation over the long term. And that's ultimately what I think governments need. They need that innovation. And a direct commercialization model, when governments actually need to interact and they need to know, they don't really need to use software. They need a commitment from the vendor for support for X number of years. And so I think Red Hat just made it, they just nailed it, guys. I mean, they said, okay, here's our upstream open source, it's free, and we're going to innovate like crazy up there. We're going to take that innovation and we're going to build a product that's commercial that we're going to license to you. And that license is a commitment to support it for 5 years and to patch it in a month if the next heartbleed happens, we'll patch it even sooner. Otherwise, this is our release cycle. This is our end of life cycle. So I believe responsible governments need that commitment of the commercial license. But there is a way, and it has been shown, pretty well in the market, how you do this by saying, here's the open source and here's the commercial, and the commercial endeavor funds the innovation and maintenance. Now, whether that commercial endeavor is a nonprofit or a for-profit, I don't think that matters. But I think that the expectation is that when government is using a piece of infrastructure in production, that they understand who is producing that, what does the software supply chain look like for the components, what's the security so I can be ISO and SOC, what's the commitment to update. They really need that commercial license. So that's sort of my quick take on it. And I think that the DPGA should move from more of a registry to a catalog, where the DPGA says, here are the open source projects, and we've vetted their governance so we can differentiate this open source project that's owned by a commercial brand like HashiCorp Terraform, where they could change the license tomorrow. And so I believe the DPGA has a role to play in vetting that the software is safe and that the license can't be changed. I don't think they do that today, but I think they should do that. And that the DPGA said, okay, we understand that this infrastructure needs to be funded. So here's the metric that you measure value. If it's a registry, how many registrations are there? If it's energy, it's how many, kilowatts of hours are you doing? If it's financial it's how many transactions? But the DPGA registry should be more like a catalog where governments can understand what's the unit of consumption for this piece of software and how can I create a budget for it? Because I find that actually governments have a lot of confusion around, they want to know how much it's going to cost. And then we're like, no, it's free, but it's not free. And so I believe actually creating some clarity around the product so customers understand, if I'm a small country, I need less than a big country, but how do I actually measure it? What's the unit of value that I'm using to measure? And then from there, you can go to pricing. And so I'm not even saying that DPGA should ever mention price on something like this, but they should mention the unit of value. So that's my quick idea on it. But I think funding has to flow when a country uses a piece of infrastructure. Funding has to somehow flow back to the project. Grant funding isn't enough, isn't ultimately sustainable. With that said, probably too much. I want to go to final thoughts. So I want to give each of you about 90 seconds to tell us more about your project or next step or whatever's important to you. We're going to do alphabetical order again to keep it easy. Akansha, last thoughts?
Thank you so much, Mike, for having me here. And it's interesting to hear about different DPGs and actually how do we think about the sustainability of platform, because till now in my mind, and this is something we have discussed, is like because we are working in so much underdeveloped and developing countries, that should we be asking for it, or should we be having a pro version of something which governments need very they need it all, or should we apply for more grants, more funding so that it's sustainable, or can it be sustainable with the help of local academia, local universities, so that you are training the next set of people, generations which are coming, which wants to use it, which wants to implement it and contribute towards it. But having said that, I agree that not everybody thinks the way I'm thinking within the team also, because it's a big project, and you also like you said, DPG, it's never free. Even when we are doing something, it's costing our time, our effort, our resources, which other person does not actually sometimes agree till the time they have to pay for it. So having said that, I'm quite excited that we actually have a DPG and want to make it more in coming years, more useful, more going towards more use cases, and hopefully it can help reduce the number of people who do not have access to electricity, especially with the population which is growing up. And lastly, I'll be there on 1st and 2nd in Brussels, speaking in energy dev room. You can come and listen about EAE more in details, and we have the DPG stand as well. Thank you so much.
Awesome. David, last thoughts?
Well, thank you for organising this, Mike. I mean, I think it's great to just have these discussions, and and whenever we have these discussions, I think it surfaces the same thing. Different DPGs, different problems they're trying to solve, but the same problems they face. And it's great to be able to, demonstrate that, just talking to each other, probably bounces ideas off each other as to what we can do. I look forward to, meeting up with some of you people in person at FOSDEM and some of the other DPGs that are going to be there as well, because just talking through what we're doing and how we can align is of great benefit, really. As Alexander said, we'll be on the DPGA stand at FOSDEM. Please come and pester us, say hi, grab a sticker or two, or and just have a chat. I think we're stand 10 in Hall H, if I remember correctly. So yeah, come see us, say hi.
Awesome, thanks, David. Ed, last thoughts?
Well, I think 2025 is looking like it's going to be a very important, but a tremendous year for us at OpenCRVS. Last year, we went live. Live implementations went from 1 to 4, and these are live national scale implementations in countries around the world. So no small feat. We're on an upwards trajectory to try and get to 20 national scale implementations by 2030. So we're tracking on that, and everything we do is focused on that because of our very important mission. Call to action. We'd love to. We very much play in the open, like all the digital public goods. Our source code is there, our documentation is there. We'd like to encourage people to go and check out our code, not just look at it, but install it, configure it, and provide feedback for us on it. We're always looking on the outlook for contributors to our code. If there are any skilled developers for whom this would be really interesting. We've got issues on GitHub which are good for beginners, issues which they can create pull requests for and contribute and get it work together with our technical team. That would be tremendous. Otherwise, come and meet us at FOSDEM. I'll be there in Brussels in a couple of weeks' time. I'll give them a demo of the application, and we can talk about how people can get involved. Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, and so I actually enjoy doing these live streams because I feel like I get to visit with my colleagues, and then it's nice when we get together at a conference. But I also feel like a lot of people don't have the privilege of being able to get to Brussels in the next 2 weeks. So I feel like this is more accessible to a lot of people who maybe couldn't make it to FOSDEM. So we're there with you in spirit. This is a FOSDEM, I guess, virtual fringe event. And yes, but if any of you are lucky enough to be at FOSDEM, we have a stand in Building H, and which will be manned by DPGA product owners and evangelists and others. So please stop by. If it's your first time to visiting FOSDEM, welcome. Prepare yourself for sort of a festival, carnival-like atmosphere with a lot of people. And get there. If you have any rooms that you want to go to, get there really early and make sure you get into the rooms that are really important to you. Because if you show up at rooms in the last minute, you're not getting in. So prepare yourself, but it's a fantastic event. Even if you don't like tech, there's great food trucks there. So please join us. And reach out to me anytime on LinkedIn or comment here on YouTube. So with that, I'll say thank you to the audience for joining us. And please join us next week. We have Balaji, a DPGA evangelist, who's joining us. Some player to be named later from MOSIP will be joining us. And we're looking for a third guest for the second episode of the FOSDEM 2025 DPG Product Owner Livestream. Please like it on YouTube. And with that, thank you very much. Thanks, audience, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers, bye.
Thank you, Mike.
Bye.